So what I want to do here is I want to go through the conversion between electron volts and joules. This is something that you use in the chapter on the electron, but it's also something that you use in radioactivity, and I haven't really found anything online in the likes of videos that deal with this from a Leaving Cert point of view. So that's why I want to go through it here. So we start off with something nice and easy, and if you have let's say you have 200 electron volts, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to convert that into joules. Now, we can approach this in a couple of different ways. So I'm just going to put some rules on this to make it neater. The idea of an electron volt, well, we know that 1 electron volt is the charge in the electron, 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19 in joules, basically. That's how I remember that number, because that's the charge in the electron. That is in your log tables. It's not something you have to remember off yourself. It makes sense then, if you have 200 electron volts, that you are basically taking that and multiplying it by 200. So 200 electron volts is just 200 times 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. And that's fairly straightforward. So again, logically trying to think through this will get you most of the way in this. When you multiply that out, you get 3.2 by 10 to the minus 17 of a joule. Now, let's go the other way. Let's go and let's say I'm given 1.8 by 10 to the minus 13 of a joule. And what I'm trying to do is convert that into electron volts. So to go from electron volts into joules, I'm multiplying by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. To go from joules back to electron volts, I have to do the opposite of that, which is divide by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. So my solution, my answer here then is going to be 1.8. So that number divided by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. And what do I get there? I get a big number, 500. So that's 1.125, let's say, by 10 to the 5 electron volts. Okay, so on the face of it, that's easy enough. To go from electron volts to joules, you multiply by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. And to go from joules to electron volts, you divide by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. Now, this is not what I see usually when I'm correcting mock papers. This seems to be an area that people get confused in. Now, when you do these as just straightforward questions like this, they're easy enough. When they turn up as part of a bigger question, that seems to be where they cause trouble. It's like, oh, what do you do? Do you multiply? Do you divide? Now, I'm going to show you two different ways of trying to remember this. And the first way is, if you are trying to convert here and you're trying to get into joules, electron volts don't contain the unit joules. So how are you going to get joules in your answer? You are going to multiply in by a joule, by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19 joules. So here, when you start with electron volts, you are getting your answer in joules by multiplying by joules. Okay. When you already have your answer in joules, what you want to do is you want to get rid of those joules because you want your answer in electron volts. So how do you get rid of something? You divide. And I have my number here in joules, and I'm dividing it by another number in joules. So that joule cancels out the joules, and then your answer is in electron volts, which is not joules. There's one way of looking at it. There is another more mathsy way of looking at it. This does tend to divide people because some people like it, some people don't like it. I'll put it out and you can decide yourself. First thing that okay, so let's call this question 1 up here. Okay, so that's question 1 and this is question 2. So question 1, electron volts to joules. Question 2, joules to electron volts. So I want to do question 1. And I'm given 200 electron volts. First thing I'm going to do is you write down 1 EV is equal to 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. This is how you always start off. No matter what you're given, electron volts or joules, you start off by writing down this. And then you make it into fractions on both sides. Now, in this question 1 up here, what am I given? I am given electron volts. So I'm going to keep the electron volts together. So if I'm given electron volts, you put that in the electron volts fraction over here. Now, I'm trying to convert it into joules. I don't know what the joules are, so I will let joules be x. What's important here is the electron volts stay beside each other, one on top of the other, and the joules stay one on top of the other. And then all you have to do then is cross multiply and solve for x here. So when I cross multiply, what I'm going to get is 1 times x, which is x, is equal to, and the top, so sorry, just to recap on cross multiplying here, top by the bottom of this fraction is equal to the top of this fraction multiplied by the bottom of this fraction. So top by bottom is equal to the top by the bottom. The top by the bottom here is 1 times x, which is x, is equal to 1 by 10 to the minus 19, by 10 to the minus 19 multiplied by 200. So you get your multiplication here. And that we know from up the top is 3.2 by 10 to the minus 17 of a joule. And there's your answer. So you don't have to think which is multiplication, which is division. You just have to write it in this form, cross multiply, and it works itself out. Okay, let's do one more example here. So let me give you a bit of space, and we'll do question 2. So question 2, let's just go back up here. We were given in joules 1.8 by 10 to the minus 13. So again, start off your question. 1 electron volt is equal to 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19 joules. Okay, make both of them into fractions. And in question 2, I'm given joules. So I don't know what electron volts is, so that becomes x. And I'll put this in here. And now you solve by cross multiplying. So the top of this multiplied by the bottom of this, you get 1 times 1.8 by 10 to the minus 13, which is 1.8 by 10 to the minus 13. And that's equal to the top here multiplied by the bottom here, which is equal to x times 0.6 by 10 to the minus 19. And let me put in a little bit of space here. What do I want? I want x on its own. So to do that, I divide both sides by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. And that gives me now. So you will get your electron volts here, and we know from up here we get 1.125 by 10 to the 5. And that's my answer, x here in electron volts. So there is 2 different methods for changing between electron volts and joules and electron volts. You decide which one suits you better. I definitely know there are people who see this way with the fractions here and go, perfect, yes, I get that now. It's a process that you go through. You just write this out same way each time. If you're given joules, as in here, if you're given joules, you put it on the joule side. And if you're given electron volts, you put that on the electron volt side. X goes in where you are trying to find what you're trying to find, and you cross multiply and you solve. And there is no trying to remember which is dividing, which do you multiply by. The other way of looking at it is that you can just learn it off. of course, that's another solution. And the other way that I was saying is that the whole kind of jiggery-pokery with the joule thing. If you're given electron volts, you are looking to put it into joules. So you're looking to get a joule symbol. So how do you do that? You multiply it by joules. If you have joules and you're trying to get it into electron volts, you're trying to get rid of the joule symbol. And how do you do that? You divide it by something else in joules. So that's where you divide by 1.6 by 10 to the minus 19. Okay, I really hope that helps, guys. Take it easy. Bye.